Welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast. Today's Thursday, June the 27th. Zach Ewing with Matthew Paris, Luke Johnson, Jeff Duncan today. Got a fun show for you today. We're going to be talking the most important Saints. Not the best Saints, not the most talented Saints, not the most valuable Saints, the most important Saints for the 2024 season, the ones who can make or break the season that's coming up. We're going to get to that right after this from our sponsor.
Hoop fans, take the court with Caesars Sportsbook. Place your pregame bets now. Build parlays and same-game parlays, then combine them into super parlays for a chance at greater payouts. And with Quick Picks, Caesars turns the biggest stories of the game into pre-built parlays you can just tap right into. So don't just watch basketball. Download Caesars Sportsbook and experience it like never before. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
Insider Podcast. Before we get going today, I want to invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, visit us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, all that good stuff. Share it with your friends. We're working hard through the summer, and we want you to let everybody in your life who's a Saints fan know about the Saints Insider. So, guys, most important Saints. You can read Matt's story about this, where he wrote up a little description of each of his 10 most important Saints on NOLA.com/Saints. But we're going to go through, all three of you made a list, and I did a little AP poll style tabulation of the voting, and we came up with our group ranking of who the most important Saints. That's right.
Did you not make a list as well?
I did not. No, I felt like y'all three were so good that I didn't need to do that.
That's a really nice cop-out, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm driving from Livingston Parish. I got to leave by 10 a.m. I did find it interesting, though. There's one name in particular who was number one on Jeff Duncan's list, who was on neither of y'all's lists.
It crossed my mind, but we will explain. I'll explain it anyway.
That's a teaser. He is on the list because he gets 10 points from a first place vote from Jeff, so he is on the list. Okay. So we'll talk to him. So basically, let's explain the concept real quick here. Most important swing players, if you will. I mean, guys who, if they have a good year, it could mean a lot for the Saints. If they have a bad year, it could mean really bad things for the Saints.
Right. I think that was the best way to clarify that, because, like as you said, this is not the 10 best Saints. I think we could do that ranking too, and probably have maybe a little bit more similar rankings than we had. Matt and I were actually pretty close on a lot of these. Jeff, always a contrarian. It's a little bit different, but I do think that when you're looking at degrees of importance, you can come up with a kind of a different sort of viewpoint looking at this roster, and which players this season kind of hinges upon, which is, I think, what the point of this exercise was. Yeah,
like the way I viewed it was, you kind of know what you're getting from Eric McCoy, for instance. Like, he's going to be solid. You're not going to have to worry about him. A guy like Trevor Penning, he's pretty important to the Saints' plans, especially if Ryan Ramczyk can't go.
Yeah, and in some cases there's some crossover on that. I found it, Jeff, your list came in after you saw Matt and Luke's, so were you being contrarian on purpose, or was this
a little bit,
the answer
is yes.
Of both? The answer is yes.
Usually I think outside the box.
That's
how I roll.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think you make a good point, though, of like, guys that you kind of know what they are. I feel like that's not what this list was about. That's why I didn't have Derek Carr as high, because I feel like we know what Derek Carr is. I feel like
I'll quibble with that a little
11 years in, all these different offensive minds he's been with, I feel like I know what he's going to be.
We're going to have some good arguments today. I can feel it.
Yeah.
I can feel
Spicy. Let's go.
All right, so let's get started. Before we get into our top 10, there's a few guys who kind of the also receiving votes category. 3 secondary players actually all received just a couple of lower down votes. Alontae Taylor, 3 points, so that's like 1 10th place and 1 9th place. Paulson Adebo had 2 points, and Tyrann Mathieu had 1 just 10th place vote. I don't know. I think, Matt, these guys are sort of, you kind of know what you're going to get from them. They're all, at this point, I guess you can't call Alontae Taylor a veteran quite yet, maybe, but we know what to expect from these guys. Taylor may be the one who, hey, can he up his game? Can he play in the slot? Is he a guy who's going to need to fill in on the outside if something happens to Marshon Lattimore? I mean, he'd be the one I'd say maybe you could throw in most important list and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, that was a Jeff call, and I understand the argument for it. I think it's probably a good one. I mean, that nickel spot was kind of a problem for them last year. He was benched several times. I think responded the way that they wanted to see after that, but he's still a little bit of a question mark going into 2024. I put Adebo on my list just because, all right, this is a contract year for him. And it wasn't so much what are you getting from Paulson Adebo in 2024. It was how good is he going to be, and is he going to set himself up for this contract that the Saints can't afford? Well, what's his season going to be like? So I thought he was really important to them just from I think he still has another, I think he can make another, take another leap. And he's also important if Marshon Lattimore doesn't pan out or, he gets hurt. So.
Yeah, I mean, Adebo's a guy with a Pro Bowl ceiling.
Yeah.
Can he get
100%.
there?
I think he probably should have gotten more consideration for the Pro Bowl last year. I mean, he had tied for top 5 in the NFL in interceptions. He was, I think, second in the NFL in pass breakups. And he was a guy who had a lot of passes thrown his way over the course of the year. And he just kind of consistently held up. I put Tyrann Mathieu on my list at number 10. And I think the reasoning for that is because he is still very important to this defense. I think you need to have, especially considering their kind of uncertainty at strong safety, I think you need to have a really strong presence at free safety. And he has given him that in his 2 years here. But he's also, I think he's 32 now. If he starts to show some signs of decline, then that could be a big problem for this team. I think it's really important that he stays on top of his game and that he's still beyond just being the veteran presence, the leader, the calming influence, that he continues to play at a high level, because they really need him back there as kind of that center field type player.
Right, and I think him being there kind of allowed them to feel like they were okay enough at safety where they could go cheaper by just bringing back Jonathan Abram to see whether Jordan Howden would take another step. He was kind of, you mentioned that calming influence. And then they also brought him back on a cheaper deal, or they reworked his contract this offseason. So, I think it's he'd be probably my 12th guy or 11th, somewhere in there.
I like the thought on Adebo. I didn't think about it, but he's the kind of guy that if he does take a step forward, you're going to feel really good about the secondary. And that's why I think Taylor is important. I mean, Taylor's clearly the guy that opponents are still going to target. I mean, I think there was some kind of stat I saw where he was, if not the most targeted DB in the league, he was #1 slot target in the entire NFL and gave up the most receptions of any slot.
Yeah, I think
corner.
that was PFF had him giving up the most receptions.
Yeah, so I mean, that obviously it's going to continue until he shows. I mean, that's where you're going to go. So he's got to show that he can step forward. That's mainly the thought of putting him on there, because I think we know. Although I would say Adebo still, I think, has to prove it. I mean, he had one really solid season, but I think there's still a little bit of a question with him.
Yeah, I agree, and I think all this is to say that the secondary is super important to the Saints' chances this year.
Sure.
We are all assuming that this is probably the deepest, most talented unit on the Saints team. I think all of us would probably agree with that.
I would say.
But they need them to play like that this year, because they do have question marks at other spots in that defense.
And I think the reason that they're down this low, even though they are that good, is because you kind of know what to expect from them. I mean, a lot of these guys have proven it. Alontae Taylor maybe not as much, but they need to continue to do it. And in case of Tyrann Mathieu, needs to continue to do it into a pretty advanced age. By the way, this is not a list of most important season for the player, although in some cases, like we talked about with the Adebo, it coincides. Yeah. And I think another one of those guys, as we move on, still kind of honorable mention, we'll do tied for 12th place. Each one of these guys came up with 5 points in our ranking system. Chase Young is one of them. Totally get that one. He's coming in from the outside. He's injured. Huge season for Chase Young. Also important for the Saints to get some of that pass rush. The other one is Kendre Miller, and Matt and Luke did not have him at all on their list. Jeff, you had him, I think, 6th, which is where he gets all 5 of those points. So start with Kendre Miller. Why is he so important to the Saints in your eyes?
Well, I mean, if you look at his limited body of work last year, it was pretty impressive. He has a lot of really strong analytical numbers, making missed tackles in open field, getting yards above expectation, which is where the other backs are very low. So if I'm the Saints, I think there's a lot of hope that Kendre Miller can eventually be the replacement for Alvin Kamara. That's why I put him on that list. I think he needs to supplant Jamal Williams as the backup. If he doesn't, I think it's a failure as a draft pick and as him this year. So I see him as a very important piece to the puzzle. You don't draft him where you drafted him without having a plan and a vision for him, even with Alvin Kamara. I mean, look at Tyjae Spears, the guy the Titans took, very similar type of draft selection. They had Derrick Henry, and now they're kind of planning around Pollard and Spears there. They need to have a vision for Miller in this offense.
I agree. Even though I didn't put him on my list, just because I think the needs for this team are much greater than having than at running back. Outside of Alvin Kamara, who I think was on all of our lists. I think I put in my running back preview that I'm predicting he's going to take over that number 2 role by at the very least mid-season, if not right out of training camp. And when you look at this Shanahan, Kubiak offense, whatever you want to call it, and the different iterations of it, over league history, even last year, these teams often have 2 running backs who are putting up pretty good numbers. Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane last year for Miami. Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce in Houston, although on a much smaller scale since Houston passed the ball a lot. San Francisco didn't necessarily have a clear number 2, but they had a lot of guys that contributed there behind Christian McCaffrey, even while Christian McCaffrey is piling up huge numbers, whether you're looking at Elijah Mitchell or some of the others there. So it's really important that they do have somebody who is capable behind Alvin Kamara, because they are going to get a lot of work in this offense. Yeah,
and I just think eventually he's going to be. I think they drafted him to be the heir apparent.
I think so too.
And I think he's shown flashes.
And if Alvin Kamara happens to miss time either because of holdout or injury or whatever, then Kendre Miller belongs probably higher on this list.
Well, I think that's the thing for me is why he didn't make my list is because we're talking about him supplanting the second running back.
Right.
If it was for Kamara, I think he would definitely be on the list. Like if he had an actual chance to become RB1, he'd be a lot more important. But if you're thinking of like, all right, what's going to make or break the Saints season? Well, whether Kendre Miller becomes the second running back in this order, I don't know if it's as important to their overall goals and needs, and that's kind of why I left him off.
So on that note, let's talk about the other guy tied for 12th here, and Chase Young is a guy who absolutely could impact the Saints' floor or ceiling.
Yeah, and he hasn't really proven to be that valuable for, Washington's pass rush when he wasn't playing was still, it's relevant. I mean, was still pretty strong, especially because they had those guys on the interior and Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. He wasn't really a difference maker for San Francisco after they, traded for him at the deadline last year. But why he still ultimately made my list was because this team didn't have a lot of cap room, and they still felt like he was worth taking a swing, and they gave him a 1-year, $13 million contract. That's pretty sizable given what the Saints were working with. They have risk built into that contract to where if he doesn't play, the Saints basically get some money back. But he can, if he's on the top of his game, he can make a difference for that pass rush because it was pretty bad last year.
If he's on the top of his game, he's absolutely a 10+ sack player.
Yeah.
Right? He's never done it in his career, but 7.5 with a ton of pressures as a rookie. Hurt the next 2 years, and then he is going into his 5th season, right?
Yeah.
Am I right on that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the peak for him statistically has been 7.5, but he's had 2 years ruined by injuries, and even last year was a little bit affected by it, if I remember correctly. So, I think we're looking at a player whose potential is clearly a double-digit sack player. It's why the Saints signed a guy to a $13 million contract, despite the fact that he hasn't produced that way.
Yeah, when Chase Young was coming out of college in 2020, I remember being at that combine and I was asking players what it was like to face Chase Young. One of the guys I actually asked, looking back at the story, was Cesar Ruiz. And he was saying just kind of the speed, and another Michigan lineman was saying that, like, how he knew just by the sound that Chase Young got to the quarterback because he could hear his quarterback get, like, crunched behind him. And it was those type of game, like, changing plays that just really, we haven't seen a lot of Chase Young doing that in the pros, but I still think the potential's there. And that rookie season you mentioned, Luke, like, he kind of waited until the latter half of that season to really heat up. But by the end of it, he wrecked San Francisco as a rookie. Arizona, he had a huge game. Pittsburgh, when they knocked off an undefeated Pittsburgh team at the time, he was really good, and he was one of the, like, the main reasons they made the playoffs at 7-9. So yeah, I mean, if New Orleans can get that version, I think it'd be a home run.
To me, he's like their Jadeveon Clowney. He's almost a carbon copy.
Yeah, Jadeveon Clowney's like a
similar.
perfect comp for him, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, in every once in a while, Clowney puts it together, and like last year, had a really good year in Baltimore, but he's fallen short of those expectations most of the time. So I think they're rolling the dice. I think a one-year deal makes sense. They've had success. I remember Nick Fairley was a similar type of reclamation project, high draft pick that hadn't panned out, and he played well. But I think seeing him as some kind of savior, I think I'm skeptical of that.
Yeah, I don't think that, like, it's even fair to put those kind of expectations on him. But I do think that, like, as bad as their pass rush was last year, I think that this Dennis Allen defensive scheme has historically gotten a lot out of pass rushers, especially on the edge. And I think he has a chance to help revive that this year. And it is really important that they get him on the field and keep him healthy and see what he can do. And it's obviously really important for Chase Young, because if he does have the type of year that he is capable of and potential of, has the potential to be, like, he could sign like a huge contract next offseason if everybody's, like, happy with the medicals.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, is you got to get him on the field first. Let's get him in camp, see what he can do. But he definitely can offer a lot of upside for a defensive line that didn't have a ton last year. So we're going to move into our sort of top 10. There's actually 11, and that's because we had a tie for 10th as well, with 6 points each in our ranking system. And these are guys, if you were ranking the 10 best players, certainly Chris Olave would be a hell of a lot higher. Carl Granderson might be higher too. Your most productive defensive lineman as far as in terms of sacks last year, and then your most productive receiver. Again, sort of like the D-backs we were talking about. Guys, you just need to go do it again.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about on the show of who's going to step up for that third receiver spot, that second receiver. Are they going to be able to replace, how much are they going to miss Michael Thomas? I think Chris Olave is going to fill that void in more ways than we might expect. And so I think that's kind of why when we're talking about the importance to the Saints, obviously he's one of their best players, but if he misses time, if he takes a step back, if he kind of goes through a mini slump like he did last year, that's when the offense starts to maybe disappoint. And that's why he's just so important to their overall, like, chances in 2024, is just because you need your best players to produce, and he's one of them.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's just be real here. Everybody knows Chris Olave is a really good player, but, like, if he's ever going to be considered a great player, he has to do it on a week-in, week-out basis. We've seen him have huge games, 150 receiving yards, 10 catches, whatever. But we've also seen him have just, like, these dips and these kind of naders in his production, where he's going out there and catching three balls for 23 yards. And they need him to be consistent. And if he is consistent and not just, like, really, really great, just okay, really good, really, really great, if he's averaging like 80 yards a game receiving, which I think is totally within the realm of possibility here. I mean, you're looking at, like, what, a 1,500-yard season for him? That'd be huge for this offense. So, yeah, I mean, like, he is a really important player to this team because, frankly, they don't have a lot of proven depth at receiver behind him. And if he's able to go out and put together like a season that truly cements himself as like a top 10 NFL wideout, then we're kind of cooking with gas here with the Saints offense.
And I would say next to Carr, he might be the one guy cannot afford to get hurt long term.
Totally.
I mean, it really drops off after him. Everyone's in a role they probably don't need to be in. So, in terms of just importance, he's definitely critical.
Yeah, I really, really like Rashid Shaheed, and I'm probably higher on him than some people are, but he's not Chris Olave.
I got to point out then, Jeff, that you did not have Chris Olave in your top 10.
No, it's a good point. I mean, more I was thinking about it, more I think that was definitely an oversight because he's so important. Like, I think he's definitely going to continue on an upward trajectory. He's got that kind of, self-starter motivation. You can kind of tell it means something to him. And I think now, clearly, he's going to be the go-to guy. I mean, there's no question he's been the go-to guy, but there's no doubt about it in this offense. As far as Granderson's concerned, I mean, I think Granderson's a little bit of an anomaly last year. He had a really good first half, and in the second half, he really dropped off after he got the contract, actually. It bothered me a little bit. So I put him on my list higher than I think both of you all had him, just because I feel like he's a guy who could go the other way, unfortunately. I mean, he hasn't done it enough, but he was an ascending player. But he's going to get a lot more attention now. And I think at this stage, Cam Jordan is strictly a role player at this point. I think the way they're going to do, I may be wrong, but I think Cam's probably going to start, play running downs. He might move inside probably in their package.
NASCAR package.
Yeah, that NASCAR package. And Chase Young's going to be, I think, a situational pass rusher and a rotational player. So I think Granderson is important for a lot of reasons of him not dropping off.
Yeah, because otherwise you're starting to rely on a Foskey or a Peyton Turner or somebody who has not done it yet at the NFL level for various reasons. So neither one of y'all had Carl. Same thing with Kendre Miller. It was Jeff, all 6 points came from his 5th place vote. Any thoughts on Carl Granderson?
I just think that some other edge rushers are more important. I think Carl's a solid player, and he's paid like a solid player, right? But like the $11 million a year you're paying him, I think that's what it is. I mean that's paying him to be like an NFL starter at defensive end. I mean, and I think that like he just needs to play at that level to me. Like if he can get you 5 sacks, you feel pretty good about it. But you're counting on Chase Young. You're counting on. I'm going to slightly disagree here with Jeff and say you're counting on Cam Jordan to have a rebound after he's able to rehab those injuries. And to me, it's much more important that Cam rounds back into form and that Chase Young is what you're signing him to be versus Carl Granderson. If he takes a step back, I think they still have other guys there that are more important to them.
I'd just be surprised if Cam Jordan, at his age,
We'll get to Cam Jordan.
goes forward.
Yeah.
Something that's expecting a lot.
Spoiler alert, we'll get to Cam Jordan. You're watching the Saints Insider Podcast, June 27th. We are ranking the most important Saints for the 2024 season into our top 10. And you're going to notice a continuation of a theme here. A guy Jeff Duncan had high on his list that neither Matt or Luke had. At 4th place on Jeff's list and 9th overall be Taysom Hill. Kind of Mr. Everything, a new role in Clint Kubiak's offense. And Jeff, I guess you're thinking like he could start to affect the game in more ways than he has in the past.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a main focal point of the offense. One thing he said, y'all remember this, that I want to follow up with him on. I kind of don't want to say it too loudly, but I guess cat's out of the bag after I say it here. But he said that
what are you doing, man?
Clint Kubiak met with him, right, in the offseason. He said he had a very frank conversation. That was the words he used. I think it was probably, you're no longer a quarterback in this system. We'll use you a little bit at quarterback, but you're going to be a main guy. That's what my presumption is, what he meant by frank. In other words, you're going to carry the ball a lot more. Your days of being a quarterback and us protecting you somewhat with your touches, no, you're going to be a main guy. Are you in on that? But I think I need to flesh that out more. But I keep coming back to that conversation, and I think the way we saw him used in the offseason, he's going to be out there a lot. And I think he's going to be a lot more prominent than like Kyle Juszczyk is in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I just think, and I think he's got the potential to have some crazy games. I mean, he's a playmaker. We know that. So I just think he's maybe their secret weapon, even though he's not really a secret.
Yeah, when I saw Jeff's list come out, I was like, how am I the guy who left Taysom off
Number
the
one
list?
in your hearts, not top 10.
I mean,
most important.
I agree with Jeff. I mean, he should be on this list. because I think he is going to have an expanded role in this offense. He's going to be, I think it's reasonable to expect him to set career highs in receiving in this offense. I think he's going to get more opportunities as a ball carrier, and not just, in the role that we've seen him in, where he's lining up under center in the shotgun and running the QB power or QB sweep or stuff like that. I think it's totally possible to expect him to get 10 touches a game on average, which is would be probably a career high for him. I think he's going to be like a heavily used component of this offense and really important to their season overall.
When I made my list for the website, I left him off just because I thought, all right, you kind of know what you're going to get for him. But I think, Jeff, why you convinced me just now listening to you is if they use him in new ways like we've seen, I think he's really important to what the Saints want to do offensively, and so that's probably why I think he deserves to be on the list. Why actually he's in on this, tiered list now is he's just like we talked about on the Over Under show that I think he's going to be their second leading rusher. I mean, I actually think he's going to have more yards than Kendre Miller or Jamal Williams. I think they're going to feature him a lot. I know he's 33 now.
34.
34, yeah. So he's really important to what they do, and I'm really excited to see it because we've always used that, like, if he has 7+ carries, they're whatever, but like those numbers are going to maybe fall back to earth a little bit, but it's a good thing that he's going to get more than 7 carries if that's how it shakes out.
Yeah.
By the way, I was going to say, he's 34. He seems like the youngest 34 I've ever seen, right? In terms of like the way he carries himself, the way he looks. I mean,
he only looks 34, after he's had 12 touches and he's been like, a battering ram on, because that dude is absolutely battle scarred after every single game.
Yeah,
it's crazy. He's just got like scratches on him all over the place.
But you don't see it much in his performance.
No, yeah, for sure.
Like he still seems very fast to me. He doesn't seem like he's lost a step. And I think Clint Kubiak's identified that early and said, "There's more here."
All right. I mean, we haven't seen him throw a pass this spring or this summer now.
Well, and I think one of the things that's also worth bringing up with Taysom Hill is that this whole offense is about deception, right? And it's about making everything look the same, and having all these different things you do out of it. And I think Taysom Hill is like a fulcrum for that. You can do so many things with him on the field that it makes it really hard to predict. Whereas like when he was on the field as a quarterback before, you pretty much knew what was coming. And the crazy thing is that like if he's lining up at the shotgun with Adam Prentice to his right, you could pretty much bank on it being a quarterback power, and he was still getting like 6-7 yards a pop like that. Imagine what he could do if the defense doesn't know what's coming.
And think back to like when Sean Payton first got Reggie Bush, right? They use Reggie Bush half the time as a decoy. So it's exactly what Luke's talking about. I think they use him. All eyes are almost always on number 7 because he's got that potential. And I think they're going to use him in that way too. And so I think he's important not just when he's touching the ball, but also just in the lineup. You have to account for him.
Yeah, and then theoretically, if he is throwing fewer passes, let's say he only throws 10 all season, those have the element of surprise now, whereas maybe they didn't in the past. So, all right,
hate to admit Jeff made a good point here. It's really killing me.
We're going to have to. Should we ring the bell for Jeff? For Luke crediting Jeff?
And I'd say this to counter you there. I mean, anytime he throws a pass, I think it's kind of a surprise.
That's true. But
that's one of the things they did with him last year. He threw some passes, and everybody was loaded up on the run.
Yeah, that's true. But that just increases if there's fewer times you go to that well. So, okay, we're into the top 8 on our composite rankings. We actually have kind of a log jam here. We had 3 guys get 10 points and another get 11. So for ties, the way I broke these ties was whoever had the highest ranking on an individual list won the tie. And so the first guy with 10 points is 8th place overall. That's going to be Trevor Penning. And Jeff, you didn't have him on your list. We'll get to that in a minute. I do think he's a guy. Matt, I mean, he could clearly make or break this O-line. I mean, if it works at right tackle with him, then all of a sudden now other guys kind of fall into place. If it doesn't, then you're scrambling again.
Yeah, I mean, they've built contingencies. If it doesn't work, they signed Ali Udoh. Could always move Fuaga back to right tackle. They have Landon Young. Like, they have, I think, a couple fallback options, but it's still a pretty big ask of, asking a guy who got benched 6 games into last season. He gave up 4 sacks and 10 total pressures in those 6 games, according to Pro Football Focus. Like, I think we kind of forget how bad Trevor Penning was when he was actually playing. And, I think the Saints have done a really smart thing of trying to build him back up confidence-wise. They've said all the right things. Moving him to right tackle instead of left gives him a fresh start. But, how much do they really trust him? We wrote these position previews that'll be coming out over the course of next month and this month too already, and that was my question for the offensive tackles was, how much do they actually trust Trevor Penning? How long is his leash if he does struggle? And that's kind of why I think he was 6th on my list, is because there's just a range of outcomes there that I think will be pretty telling. And if he doesn't work out, then yeah, they have those fallback options, but it's still a really big blow given that he is a former first-round pick and he's had, now kind of countless. He's had a few chances to succeed, and if he can't do that, then
Yeah, and I think that's why I have him on here too. It's just, yes, he is important to this team this year, even though they do have fallback options, guys who've played, who've started at the NFL level. But also, just for the franchise, if you developed a first-round pick, that not only a first-round pick, but somebody that you traded a future first-round pick to help get that selection, which ended up turning into Jalen Carter, who had an amazing rookie season for the Philadelphia Eagles. If that guy just becomes a bench warmer for you, you're going to have to reinvest in the offensive tackle position again next year. This is a team that needs those resources. It needs them across the board. If you're going to have to draft your 3rd offensive tackle in the first round in the last 4 years, that's a huge problem. So yes, he's important this year for the reasons you brought up, and he's important to the franchise just as a whole for their future outlook. This is a crucially important season for Trevor Penning, because if he doesn't figure it out this year, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's 100% agree. This is it. If he washes out. And I think more importantly, you said something that I think is very important. If Trevor Penning washes out for the Kansas City Chiefs right now, no one cares. They can absorb it. This team doesn't have that luxury.
Right.
They need every one of these guys to hit for them. That's how precarious things are. They're in a very fragile position, I think, and he has to at least be a competent starter. I think that's what they need him to at least get to. And right now, I think that's a big question mark. So he probably does deserve to be on there. The only thing I'd say is, I did feel like they kind of covered their bases a little bit, so it made me feel a little better. If they had to stick Landon Young out there, they'd survive. But the ceiling for Trevor Penning is much higher. And
he's a bit like Chase Young in that it's a bonus if you can get a big season from him, but if he doesn't, you're not dead in the water necessarily, although this offensive line needs to be better.
Yeah, but they're also trusting him right now to be their starting right tackle. That's kind of why he's so important to me, is because they aren't nursing him along and saying, all right, let's move you to right tackle, but you'll still be with the second team. They're really trying to trust him to be a starter, to build that confidence back up. And I don't know are we going to be doing position previews on this
podcast? We may get to those.
Okay, I don't know. I have my bold prediction for the offensive tackles is Penning related as well, but I don't know if I want to.
All right, we'll keep that in the can. We still got about 3.5 weeks to training camp. So,
but yeah.
Let's move on here. The next guy also at 10 points. We try to go. We talked about this a little bit, but quickly, guys, you had a disagreement on Cam Jordan. He's our guy at 7th most important Saint. Also had 10 points in our ranking system. Again, if he bounces back, what a huge bonus for the Saints. If he doesn't, that brings up a lot of question marks.
Yeah. Hey, look, Cam Jordan was one of the most consistent defensive edge players in NFL history before last year, right? I think I might have even brought it up on the pod last week. I think the only other players, he had 11 straight seasons with 7.5 sacks, and the only other player who ever did that in NFL history was John Randall, Hall of Famer. So I think it'd be, well, last year was disappointing, 2 sacks, not getting a whole lot of impact on opposing quarterbacks. I think it's okay to be like, maybe those injuries were really, really slowing him down, and maybe he's never going to be the guy who's putting up 12 sacks again. But if he can give you 7, if he can give you 7.5, you feel pretty good about it, because you have some depth there. Guys who have question marks, no doubt, but he's still a player who's impacting the game, and he's still going to be a solid run defender. He's still going to hold the edge down. He's going to be one of the smartest players you have on the field. You just need him to produce. It's really important for this team. Like, I don't think Cam can just be out there rocking a jersey and living on the good vibes from his first 11, 12 years of the franchise. He's got to be productive for them. I think he is really important to this team still, and I still think, and Jeff, I know you disagree, but I still think there's more in the tank there. Even if it's not like Pro Bowl, All-Pro, whatever huge sack numbers, it's still, he's got to be just getting after the quarterback and getting home more.
Yeah, I just don't know if he can do it anymore. I think he's going to get hurt again. His body starts breaking down. But I do agree. I mean, he's so smart. If anybody can do it, it would be Cam Jordan, just because he's one of the smartest players I've ever covered. He compensates in so many ways for his declining physical condition. But, man, the list of players at that position at his age that have been productive is very few. I mean, I don't even know how many players are left from the 2011 draft in the league. It might be.
I don't know. Cam points them out every time.
Yeah, it's like a handful.
Across.
I mean, remember
That
Mark Ingram was in that same class.
Andy Dalton.
Von Miller still in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Matt Stafford that year, or was that?
No, Matt Stafford was 2 years
Name an
before.
everyday
he was even
player,
2009.
like a defensive end or something.
Yeah.
Cam is a very unique player, though. I'm with you on that, but he's never been a player who wins by speed. Athleticism, yes, but his power, his anchor is such a huge part of what he does. And I think that's still there. And there are some, like Calais Campbell's been an effective guy who's kind of a similar type of player, into his mid-30s. A couple others. Cam will very quickly point out that a lot of guys have had great seasons after turning 30. Cam's 35 now, a little bit different, but I still think there's more in the tank with him.
I just think Chase Young said a lot to me.
But that they went out and got him. The $1 million question here, Matt, is that can Cam brought the injury over and over and over again last year. Is he actually healthy? And if he is that what makes the difference?
Yeah, I mean, had ankle surgery this offseason to address that. There were other injuries. He pointed out that, because he was trying to compensate for the ankle, that his neck started to bother him, or back or something. That, part of it kind of did feel like an excuse at times, because even before he hurt his ankle in the Atlanta game, he still was on pace for finishing with a career low in sacks. His production wasn't nearly what it was. Now, some of those underlying numbers, the pressures, those were a little bit better. If you looked at his production at the last year before the injury, pressure-wise, versus 2022, the numbers were actually kind of better. So it's kind of hard to tell with those things. But I think the reason why he's so important too is, it's Cam Jordan. He shared a graphic from a fan the other day, or maybe it was even an NFL Network thing, where they put him on the Mount Rushmore of Saints. I think he deserves that spot. And you're talking about one of the 4 best players in franchise history. For him to still show that he can be a relevant pass rusher is really important to him, and I think it's really meaningful to a franchise that we've talked a lot about whether this team is nationally relevant or whether they've lost star power or buzz. He's still one of the faces of this team, and if he can reestablish that dominance or just reestablish that production, I think it's really important to them just kind of being a face of the league too.
Yeah, kind of an emotional beacon for the team, too. Okay, 6th place also with 10 points, but he gets the tiebreaker here because one of you had him as number 1, and the other 2 had him not ranked at all, and that is everybody's favorite head coach, Dennis Allen. Jeff, you had him ranked number 1 most important Saint.
Yeah, well, actually, I got the idea from Matt and Luke, who had Clint Kubiak on there. So I thought, well, if coaches are open territory here, then I'm going to put DA on there because I think DA obviously is a make or break year for him, and I don't think it has anything to do with the X's and the O's or even the in-game management. I think it comes down to how does he handle the team when adversity hits. How is he as a crisis manager? That's where I think he's fallen short as a head coach in a lot of ways. The attention to detail in the building, all those little things that you have to do as a head coach. He's got to take a step forward in that area, I think, to be successful because we know there's going to be adversity. It happens every year.
Every team.
This start is going to be critical. Now, I mean, they're going to be favored in the opener against Carolina, and then maybe they'll be underdogs in the next 4 games.
So they play Tampa at home, maybe.
No, they play at Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that's the next time they would be favored. Yeah.
So they could easily start 1-4. How's he going to handle that? I mean, there's going to be doubt creeping into the locker room. Fan base is going to be apoplectic. How does he handle it? That's what I'm thinking. That's my thought. He's got to keep this ship righted, and I think he can. But that's what I want to see from him because I think that's where he's falling short. When things have started going bad with this team, we've seen what's happened. It's been dysfunctional.
Yeah, this is a whole pod, could be, I think, and maybe should be before the season starts. But we're running a little short on time. Guys, my question with DA is what can he do differently that's going to make a huge difference?
I think he already has made the biggest different change that he's going to make, and that's replace the entire offensive staff. And he probably did it a year too late, which, you don't want to talk about, how guys should have been fired, but, they were not good offensively his first year. And there's, they had excuses for it. The quarterback got hurt, the receivers got hurt, yada, yada. But, it wasn't good enough even with the best guys on the field. He waited the year to make that call. It was a difficult decision. But, I think he's already done the most important thing. You got a new offensive coordinator with new ideas and new assistant coaches. And, that's why I think a lot more of this Saints season success hinges on what Clint Kubiak can do in that position than what Dennis Allen's going to do, because I think he's already made the biggest move he can make.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's basically given Clint Kubiak, he's not an assistant head coach title, but he's really trusted the offense to him. And, once the season starts, I'm sure Dennis Allen will still have some say of how much they want to run the ball and that sort of stuff. But right now, he's really trusting Clint Kubiak and the coaches that Clint Kubiak brought in to say, all right, run this, fix it. I think it's really, that's an important trait for a coach to have. And so why he wasn't necessarily on my list, but it's still a huge year for Dennis Allen, is because he's really kind of passing it to Clint Kubiak and trusting him. And so it's much more important for Clint Kubiak to pay off than maybe Dennis Allen. But yeah, I mean, Dennis Allen and Clint Kubiak are tied together in my mind.
Yeah.
So if I was going to have a coach on this list, I put Kubiak. I didn't want to have 2 coaches just for.
Well, we do. We ended up with 2 coaches, and we'll get to Kubiak. But if you're paying attention, you can probably tell who our top 5 is. I think with Dennis Allen, what you guys are saying is the hay's already in the barn a little bit. It's a very important year for him, and the results are going to determine his future in New Orleans. But he's already done what he can do. Now, that's not to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's week to week. He is obviously going to have a big impact or a big role on this team from a week-to-week basis. He is the head coach, obvious. And I think Jeff makes a good point in that he does have to be better as a crisis manager, because I think you can see it on his face when things aren't going good, which I don't think you want to see in a head coach. But when it comes to this specific season and how things are going to play out, I think a lot more is dependent on whether this offense can take a step.
And I think he's already taken steps to kind of. It's not just so much just also being a crisis manager, it's the way you connect to players, right? So, having that conversation with Marshon Lattimore when trade rumors are persisting, that's important. Reaching out to Trevor Penning to let you know, hey, those first 2 years, they don't matter. Trying to build guys up, trying to lighten the mood around kind of practices and meetings. He's done a bit of that this offseason as well. So I do think he's trying to approach it differently. But yeah, how much that matters. It'll matter in the long run for sure.
Well, speaking of relationships with players, I think our next two guys are at the top of that list. Fifth most important Saint with 14 points, Marshon Lattimore. A lot of us thought he wouldn't even be here this year. Here he is, and he's the fourth most important Saint on our list.
Yeah, well, if he's healthy and playing at the level he's capable of, he's one of the best defensive backs in the NFL, period. So, yeah, I mean, they need him to return to form. It's absolutely paramount for this team. They can hold, obviously without him, they have done for the last 2 years. He's missed 17 games the last 2 years. They've managed to fill in. But, like, if Lattimore gets hurt, then you're really you're really kind of thinned out in case another one of you guys gets hurt. In case Adebo or Taylor or Kool-Aid McKinstry has to miss time. And you're talking about putting in, like, what, Rajon Wright in the starting lineup? I mean, like, Ike Yadam filled in really admirably last year, but you can't count on those guys to just go in and replace Marshon Lattimore in the lineup. So it's really important for this defense. Like, that secondary is going to be the backbone of this defense, and Lattimore is the best player in that unit when he's healthy and playing at his best level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that says it all. You guys had him higher. Jeff, Marshon Lattimore was 10th on your list. And they did add more depth there. They have Kool-Aid McKinstry. I mean, like, I think there was at least an alternate reality in which they were preparing to play this season without Marshon Lattimore.
Well, yeah, and I also think they showed that they're not. I mean, their numbers are actually better without him. I mean, and they've done that the last 2 years. I agree with Luke, though. I mean, he's obviously a talented player. I just feel like they can live without Marshon Lattimore. That's why I think they were in the market to trade him. I think they knew that.
I just think they're not going to be facing Tommy DeVito and Tyson Bagent and Gardner Minshew this year. Like, they need their.
Well, they weren't last year either when he played, and the numbers were better without him.
They need their guy out there,
right,
in my opinion.
We'll finish up with Marshon. I screwed this up, and I apologize to Normie. Probably Marshon Lattimore's actually fourth on our list. I skipped somebody. You probably saw the graphic, but go ahead and finish up with Marshon, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just want to see it. Like, personally speaking, like, I joined the beat right as Marshon Lattimore, like, you know, he got hurt in the Minnesota game. That was my second game covering. Like, I just want to see, I guess, I just want to see him establish that dominance. And his media session a few weeks ago is really interesting in terms of, there was just that confidence there that, oh yeah, I'm still a number one cornerback. Like, I'm the best. And we haven't really seen that, and I'm just curious to whether he can get back to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's the guy who, kind of like Michael Thomas the last few years, first time you hear, oh, it's a minor injury and we don't expect him to be out long, you got to show that to me for me to believe it. Like, because these minor injuries have turned into a problem for him. Okay, apologies again, I messed that up. Fifth place, that was Marshon Lattimore's fourth. Fifth place was Alvin Kamara with 11 points. And again, like I said, with the DA conversation, another guy, he's going to have to kind of manage this. Part of that's going to come down to the salary, but are you going to be dealing with a disgruntled star at running back? And maybe more to the point, Luke, on the field, can Alvin Kamara regain some of the form from earlier in his career under Clint Kubiak's offense?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. This whole thing is built on the running game. They need him to be a star, or at least a much better version of the player that he's been for the last couple of years. I am confident they'll get it out of him, but, like, we have to see it at some point, because it's been since 2020 when he was awesome. I think he had, like, 21 touchdowns that year.
That was the year of the Vikings Christmas Day game.
Right.
Yeah.
He was great that year. And that was the last year, second to last year of Sean Payton. They need him to be closer to that. And maybe he's never going to be that again. They need him to be closer to that than what he has been, which is, I mean, frankly, pretty much replacement level running back, especially last year. So it's it's really important for this team, and that he is once again a factor in the passing game. Like, if they can get him to take up some of those yards after the catch, great. But it's across the board last year. Yards per carry, one of the worst numbers of his career. Yards per catch, one of the worst numbers of his career. Yards per touch, definitely the worst of his career. So they need him to get back to being Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, Matt, you had him higher than anybody. I think 4th.
Yeah, I mean, I think the contract situation really plays a factor in here. Is what they do and how they handle that will be really telling to see how they feel about Kamara's future here. Are they going to give him some money guaranteed into 2025? Is that going to be the happy compromise, or are they still trying to give themselves an out for this year or next year? Because the way that they were handling it, they made it seem pretty clear that by not restructuring his contract when they had to get cap compliant, that all right, this is going to be your last year with us, and whether they break on that or change directions, I don't know. And then how does he respond if he doesn't get his way? Like the contract drama, I think, really shoots him up on this list, and also how important the running game is to Clint Kubiak.
And the last thing I'd say about this is, I think 2017 draft, like, who was in that running back class?
I mean,
McCaffrey,
ton of guys. Aaron Jones, Jamal
Fournette?
Williams was in it. I think Leonard
I think Fournette was in there, and I think Dalvin Cook maybe.
Yeah.
Dalvin Cook was in it. Yeah.
So that's my
ton of
question.
guys. I think Austin Eckler was in that too.
Is
Yeah.
Alvin McCaffrey or is he Dalvin Cook? Same draft class. One guy's pretty much out of the league. Fournette is out of the league pretty much. McCaffrey's an MVP candidate. Where does he fall on that wide range? Probably somewhere in between, maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah. I mean,
guys fall off. Dalvin Cook was a Pro Bowler every year, and he's out of the league. It happens.
Well,
It does. I do think that Alvin's ability as a pass catcher extends his career a little bit. I think he's closer to Aaron Jones than Christian McCaffrey. Aaron Jones is still a pretty good player, but he's not somebody you're going to revolve an offense around like you will with Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, Packers moved on from him because they, so that's the question, I think, with him.
Yeah. And Christian McCaffrey had a kind of a career renaissance. Not that he was bad in Carolina, but he obviously got better when he moved under this offense. So as we rank the most important Saints, that's a good transition into our number 3 most important Saint. And that's a guy that you two had as your second most important, and Jeff was a little bit lower, but you had him listed as well. And that's Clint Kubiak, because he comes in, we talked about this, Matt, he's going to revamp the scheme. How quickly can it get up to speed, and how much better does it make that Saints offense? Those are huge questions for this 2024 team.
Yeah, and we mentioned it just before, but Dennis Allen is basically trusting his job security that Clint Kubiak can fix this. If you want to ring the bell, Luke, it reminds me of Ron Rivera trusting Eric Bieniemy to save his job, and it didn't work out that way. And Washington's offense was still really bad. Like, the thing I'm interested to see league-wide is so many teams now are trying to run this offense that you're not going to have a top 10 offense, like, just mathematically, because so many teams are running the same scheme. You're going to need coaches who have that attention to detail, to know how to maximize their players, and so many other factors. That is Clint Kubiak the guy who can do that? The Saints have confidence that he is, and he can be, but we're going to have to see it.
To me, a lot of this comes down to whether he has what it takes as a play caller. I think there's like an art to that. And I think we've already seen that he is a more than capable teacher of the scheme, and that he has guys focused on the right details. But like, does he have it when it comes to like calling a great play on 3rd and 7 when you need it? I think that's where Pete Carmichael lacked. And Pete Carmichael was a really, really smart offensive coach. A lot of people called him brilliant. He knew the capabilities of his players, but when it came down to calling plays, he didn't have it. That's what I want to see out of Klint, because we've seen it before with him for one season in Minnesota. It wasn't great. So let's see if that is who he is as a play caller, or if the experience on Kyle Shanahan's staff helped him out there. I think it's really important for this team that he's calling the right plays in the right situations that are making this offense explosive and good.
And how does he adjust as the season goes on? Because we know there's going to be a little bit of a surprise factor early on, and then teams are going to adjust. The NFL's filled with brilliant defensive minds, and they're going to adjust. And then how does he adjust from that? How does he evolve? Because it's going to take. I mean, we've like Matt said, there's so many teams around the league running a lot of the same stuff, so it's not gonna blow anybody's mind.
What you're talking about, Luke, reminds me of I play poker, and when you play poker, there's certain moves you're going to make based on the cards on the table, based on the number of chips in the pot and what you've got in your hand, and that's just the mathematical play, and that's kind of like how Pete Carmichael called plays. But there also come time, big pots, big places in the game in a big tournament where you have to read the other guy and maybe go off script a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's the question: is can Clint Kubiak do that?
I mean, I think that's part of what makes Sean Payton a brilliant play caller. Is he is aggressive. He is a different human being, right? And he has this brilliance, this mind for it. He knows when to push the right buttons, and I think that's still a big TBD with Clint Kubiak. It's not like the scheme is not just going to be this huge savior. You're going to need the guy pushing the buttons at the right time.
All right, we got 2 left, and this I believe was the only player who was in agreement on all 3 lists. He was number 3 on all 3 lists. That makes him number 2 overall, and that is the Saints' first-round pick, Taliese Fuaga, who is being asked to step in and play left tackle and protect Derek Carr's blind side.
Yeah, I mean, they've talked about him so like nonchalantly that we just assume that he's going to be their start. He is going to be their starting left tackle, but like, oh, left tackle's not a problem. Fuaga will do it. Like, can he?
Really?
Like,
He better.
Yes, they have so like of one position, like they have all their eggs in one basket, and that's him. And you know, it's the 14th pick. That's a reasonable way to go. Like, I don't blame them for trying it, but boy, you better be right when you have that, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point you make, because like I can't remember in my history covering the NFL ever seeing a rookie that they're just like, oh yeah, he's a guy. And maybe with the exception of Chris Olave, but even still with Olave, when he was coming in with Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry on the team, where he could kind of ease into that. Like, I think his first game he was like their number 3 receiver. Fuaga is the guy at left tackle, and we've heard just absolutely nothing about like, is he the guy? How is he doing out there? It's just like, yeah, that's our starting left tackle.
There's no position battle there. That's
it's definitely unique, that situation.
And tackles lately, there's been a lot of struggles. You know, guys coming in the league. I'm trying to think his name in Carolina. What was his name from?
Ike Ekwonu.
Yeah. Struggled. And he was thrown right out there.
Yeah, and I think even guys like Andrew Thomas, I think, with the Giants.
Thomas struggled.
Who really struggled his rookie
now,
season before he became like Pro Bowl caliber.
Yeah, and
left
sometimes
tackle.
patience pays off for these guys. So I think there's going to be some growing pains there. I mean, it's a whole new position. People are going to test him, see what he's made of. So I think you're right. I think it is a good sign, though, that we don't hear much about him, and we don't even really point out. I mean, there were many times when Trevor Penning was out there where I was like, whoa, he just got cooked. And you don't see that early on. Now, we're going to find out when they put the pads on. But I do feel like there's at least a steadiness or maybe more consistency there to him.
But it is crucial to this team that he does hit those like, you know, benchmarks that they all seem to be like very comfortable with, because like I mean, left tackle was really, I mean, especially for the first half of last season when Derek Carr was really struggling, there was a lot of pressure off his blind side. Like, that needs to be solid for them this year.
I went and counted it the other day. They allowed 64 pressures from the tackles, and they allowed 190 pressures overall. That's including, you know, your running back missed assignment, your tight end blocking, not holding up. Like, that's a third of your pressures, like basically at 2 spots. That's it's not great.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if it works and he doesn't have that many growing pains and he turns into a solid starter where we don't talk about him all year, then that was a home run draft pick.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Legitimately one of the best draft picks in franchise history. That's what they're asking. I mean,
pump the brakes a little bit.
if you can get a starting left tackle
And if they go
for
3 and
all
2.
17 games, yeah, then it's amen to. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, seriously, that's a huge win.
It's a huge win, no doubt.
It's not one of the best draft
just
picks.
quibbling with like
All right.
historical.
John Armstead was taken in what,
Third
round?
round.
And he was
Yeah,
a
all
Pro
right.
Bowler.
Fair enough. All
Recency
right.
bias.
But he is very high for a first round for any draft pick on this list of most. We don't have any other draft picks who got anywhere near this list. So a lot is riding on Taliese Fuaga. And number 1 on the list, probably no surprise, probably the guy you'd rank number 1 on any NFL team's list is the starting quarterback, and that's Derek Carr. And he almost was a perfect 30 points from our Jeff. You had him as number 2 behind Dennis Allen. So we'll start with you. And I think your point was we know what he is. He is what he is, and that's what he's going to be. There may be some reason to believe that's not the case this year, but we'll let you make the case for why he's not the most important.
Well, I just think at this stage we do know what he's going to be. I think he's going to be maddeningly inconsistent. He's going to make some wild plays. He's going to look great, and he's going to have some plays where you're like, what the hell was that? And that's the way he's been his whole career. So I don't know why. Look, I remember I wrote this. This time a year ago, he looked great. He looked great. I wrote a column about how great he looked.
Said all the right things, did all the right things.
Yeah, it was amazing. And so I'm not going to get too caught up in how he looks right now. I want to see him when he plays in the games.
I'm not getting too caught up in how he looks right now.
You're caught up.
But I do think that like we've said all offseason, this offensive system scheme has maximized quarterback play. And while he has
did pretty
played
good too.
What's that?
I think that old offensive system did pretty well in that system too.
Yeah, with Sean Payton and
Ring
Drew
the bell.
Brees.
And Taysom Hill and Teddy Bridgewater.
Yes, okay.
They all played
For
well.
20 years, it was a...
They all played well in it. Teddy Bridgewater looked okay when he played.
Yeah, none of those guys had Pete Carmichael calling their plays. All right. And,
Yeah, they did. Let's go ahead. We keep going.
Okay. My point is that Derek Carr has been playing in something a lot closer to that Sean Payton offense, right? West Coast offense, versus what he's playing in now, which we've seen Tua Tagovailoa led the NFL in passing last year. C.J. Stroud was the runaway rookie of the year. 7th round draft pick Brock Purdy, it was in the conversation for MVP and led his team to the Super Bowl. All those guys were in this scheme. And we've just seen it time after time after time after time again, get the most out of quarterbacks. And I think if you're able to get the most out of Derek Carr, the inconsistency is going to be less. And I don't think we're going to see the exact same player that we've seen for his first 11 years of his career. I think it's going to be different this year. You can come back and revisit this when I'm just terribly wrong and Jeff Duncan can celebrate, and I'll buy you a drink at Clancy's.
Ran the offense in Minnesota. I don't remember it lighting up the league.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, man.
Oh, I was just going to say Sean Payton's system didn't do much to save Russell Wilson in Denver last year.
No, you can't overcome a bad quarterback.
Or Jameis Winston. I mean, I think, Derek Carr has been very inconsistent throughout his career. He has looked like one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL at weeks, and then other weeks you wonder what he's doing out there. And that's what really needs to change here. Could the scheme help that? If it does, and Carr becomes a legitimate top 10 quarterback, then New Orleans has something this season.
It does, but with respect, I don't think really the inconsistency matters as much as why Derek Carr is the most important player for the Saints this year, besides that he's the starting quarterback, is really about determining your direction as a franchise. If he plays poorly or if they miss the playoffs, you really have to take a hard, long look at it as, is this really worth going down? Should we hit the hard reset? They're really at a crossroads as a franchise right now, and how he performs is really going to set that course, I think, in terms of, they restructured his contract to where it'd be more painful to get out of, but you can still get out of it after this season, I think. And it's just really worth going down. Do you really want to tie yourself to this for how many years? Is it really worth going down? And he's going to have to perform. His job is on the line, I think. And same with Dennis Allen, and just it's a really pivotal year for this group, and he kind of controls it all, given that he's the quarterback.
And he is the quarterback.
Yeah.
They are going to go as he goes.
They also the added kind of pressure of they don't have a Jameis Winston backing him up. If he doesn't perform or he gets hurt or something, you're talking about putting in a second-year guy or a rookie in there, so that maybe increases that importance.
Well, yeah, but if he doesn't perform, we're having a completely different.
Well, then people are getting fired.
We're having the conversation that Matt was just having.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Jeff is going to Florida to convince Teddy Bridgewater to come out of retirement.
Yep.
I think that's a good place to end.
Where do you go to
Derek
school?
Carr is our most important Saint. We did have individual lists. Well, I'll put those in the comments below if you want to look at each one of these guys' individual lists. But our composite list: Derek Carr 1, Taliese Fuaga, Clint Kubiak, Marshon Lattimore was 4th, Alvin Kamara 5th, Dennis Allen, Cam Jordan, Trevor Penning, Taysom Hill, and then a tie for 10th. Chris Olave and Carl Granderson. So those are our most important Saints to the 2024 season. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, all of that good stuff. And we'll be back next week. We'll sneak one in before the 4th of July holiday, and we'll see you then. For our producer, Norman Bell, he's Matthew Paris, Luke Johnson, Jeff Duncan. I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching the Saints Insider.